Take back your soul. This is another transmission from Mahadeva here at thunderwizard.com headquarters, where you find the world's only unified spiritual energy system at thunderwizard.com. Get ready, because here I come. Yes, indeed. Not only am I coming, but they are coming. So I have a question for you. Will aliens cause a global awakening in 2023? Who are they? Will aliens cause this coming awakening that we've been hearing about, that is supposed to be coming right now? I don't know if there is going to be a worldwide global awakening to the effect that beyond anything we could have possibly imagined. That seems to be what many people are saying for various reasons. It has certainly been, the past couple of years, has been things that have happened that have been absolutely beyond my predictions. I could not have predicted that things have been happening the way that they are. So who knows? At this point, anything is possible. Even though I've been fascinated with aliens like everybody has most of my life, I especially became interested in them around the time of around 1990. And this was around the time that Whitley Strieber, who was already a very successful writer and screenwriter, he came out with his book, Communion. And then he had a few other books after that. And there was a movie made about it, about his experience, at least as he recalls it, or at least he claims to have recalled it, of being abducted by aliens throughout his entire life. And I shared with you in one of the previous videos that I saw a movie around that same time called A Fire in the Sky, which was about Travis Walton's experience. And when I watched that movie, A Fire in the Sky, I remember feeling that I was having flashbacks. Now, that doesn't mean anything. So I want you to be very clear. I want to be very clear with you. I always tend to be skeptical. As you know, if you've been following my channel for a while now, you know that before September of last year, 2021, I was, even though I was who I am, I still argued for the narrative, the mainstream narrative. And I lost a lot of subscribers because people would come onto the channel, of course, and they would share their opinions, as of course you should. And I would come after them and call them conspiracy theorists and nutbags and victim mentality and all that kind of stuff. And I really came down on people who started sharing what sounded like QAnon type of conspiracies with me about things which we can't talk about on YouTube because you'll get censored. And then in September, my view of human society completely flipped on its head. And I now am somebody who believes that we are living in a sci-fi dystopian movie where there are a global elite corporatocracy that is in fact running the world. And let me be clear on that, because not everybody is clear. There's a lot of people who share this knowledge, but they, in my opinion, don't seem to know who all of the players are. So from my perspective, the players are a group of global elites who have all of the money, have all of the power, that literally own all of the banks in the world, in every country in the world. So they literally own all of the money in the world. And they also, their primary power base comes from their shared ownership of these things: the petroleum industry, the communications industry, media, news, big tech, YouTube, Twitter, Google. They also own big pharma. So they have been having a strong influence on our society through the pharmaceutical industry. They also are the owners of the global military, what used to be called the military industrial complex. This is an international global confederation. And the whole idea that there are separate countries with separate armies is nonsense. They own both of the parties in the United States, the Democrats and the Republicans. That is how vast their ownership of the world is. And this is something that before September of 2021, I would have scoffed at with deep offense that you would even be so stupid as to believe such a thing. And so for me to go through that kind of complete 180 flip on how I view the world, and again, I've even gone greater than most people, because most people, where they want to go is they want to believe that they own big tech. They want to believe that they own a global elite deep state, military state. They want to believe that they own big pharma. But for some reason, they don't want to believe that they own big oil. For some reason, I guess, that's how it's done. You manipulate people so that there's at least, they think they're rebelling against the elite by then going to one of the elite's strongholds and saying, see, this is different. And I really want you to think about that. Those of you who believe that there is a conspiracy to take away your freedom, take away your free speech, take away your health through through big pharma, if you take away your power through big government, if you really believe that with all of your heart, why the heck are you buying into the psyop telling you that human-caused global warming is a hoax, when the people who own all of the oil have more money than big pharma? Why does that not enter your brain? Because you've been manipulated, in my opinion. So I want you to open up the idea that it's much bigger than you think. Even you, QAnons, it's bigger than you think. So I am now more willing to believe anything. I would not have believed, even though I was interested and even open to the idea of aliens, I would not have believed, if you really asked me, I would have said, I really don't think they exist. It's the possibility of there being intelligent alien life that in any way resembles what we understand about life and would be even close enough to our Earth to be able to travel here. I would have said the odds of that are astronomically, impossible. And that's because, mathematically, if you look at it, mathematically, there has to be intelligent life. It has to happen. It's a foregone conclusion. There has to be planets that are similar to Earth that can have water and create life as we know it. That has to happen. That has to be going on somewhere. There has to be intelligent life. The mathematics are very clear on that. We live in an infinite universe. It has to happen. According to science, it just sort of happened on this planet. Just some sort of sludge got hit with lightning, and next thing you know, life appeared. I don't think that's how it happened, but mathematically, that has to happen. So there's got to be other intelligent civilizations, but the idea that they will be anything similar to what we can understand, or that they will interact with physical reality the same way that we do, uh, for all we know, they could be, like in that one of the recent movies, giant octopi, that have to live in a, some kind of viscous medium, and all of that. I mean, that makes more sense to me than this, little green people that look like us but more diminutive and have, more psychic powers. That seems less likely to me, just looking at it from an objective standpoint. But I'm open to anything now. And I'm even open to the idea that aliens have been working with our governments for a long time, and that many of the things that we have are a result of reverse engineering of alien technology, including this, what you're looking at right now, this thing called the internet. I'm totally open to that now. I don't know. So what I want to do in this is I want to go over that. I'm going to be reading some books. I'm going to be reading some articles and giving you my understanding. So this is just an introduction. We'll get into some deeper stuff as we go on. But I just wanted to first get started with the idea of what is it? Who are they? My first question is this coming awakening that we are about to experience, is this going to be as a direct result of the revelation that aliens are here? Not that they're coming, but that they're here. I personally, as I said, I have had experience with many non-physical beings. And again, I am a skeptical person. I always err on the side of skepticism. Whenever I have a non-physical, shamanic, spiritual experience, my first reaction is to always debunk it. Always. Not because I need to disbelieve it, but because I know that I am a human being, and human beings tend to project onto their reality their internal fantasies, narcissisms, and fears, and all that. And so before I say something actually physically exists, I have to take it through a debunking process. That's how I came to the conclusion that I have now about the current situation in reality, which I'm not allowed to talk about because of censorship. I came to that conclusion not because I wanted to. I wasn't against it. Obviously, I was open to it. But I'm just so skeptical to things that are just so, out of the realm of, what we consider to be reality, that I just wasn't open. I just wasn't. I wasn't completely open to the idea. It had to be proven to me, and it was proven to me. Having said that, I've had a lot of non-physical experiences, which I have then tried to debunk and research, and after I have been unable to debunk it, and in fact my research does the opposite and confirms that my experience actually is something I couldn't have imagined or made up, then and only then do I talk about it and teach it. Everything that I teach. I make some huge claims about the Mao Shan practice, and it's because I've experienced it. By doing this, I have gained abilities. I'm no longer, I don't practice nearly that much, so I'm not even trying to go there. But when I was practicing, I had a lot of these kinds of experiences. I've had experiences which might be connected to these guys, but I haven't been able to prove that yet. So there is, but there has been a very clear feeling that even I, this thunder wizard, there is still a veil that I haven't gotten past. There's a reality that is frightening, that is disturbing, a feeling that there are things going on just underneath my conscious awareness, that if I were to truly become aware of them would be perhaps intense and frightening for me. I've talked to you about my experience with Bigfoot and how traumatizing that was. And after talking about it, I've had a bigger awareness about what that's all about, which maybe I'll talk about in another video. But what about these guys? Is this stuff real? Are they going to, because here's the question that I have behind that, because if these guys are real, I am fully of the belief, which is why I really appreciated Whitley Strieber's material, because the way he expresses his experience was that it was so traumatic for him. The experience, the physical experience with these beings was so traumatic for him. And that makes perfect sense because, as I said, if these beings exist, they exist on another planet. They evolved from completely different, in a different planet for different reasons. Just to give you an example, why I am more open into believing these guys than disbelieving in them is because of my experience with Bigfoot. My experience with Sasquatch, as I've told you, was incredibly traumatic. And it wasn't traumatic because I was looking at some, 8-foot tall, hairy human gorilla thing. Because the truth is that I didn't physically see him. He was just beyond the reach of my fire, but I heard him. And the experience of hearing him, and I've shared about it in other videos, was clearly from another dimension. That energy, that sound was not coming from human understandings of reality. It was another dimension that was beyond the dimension that we humans create. And I believe that we, with our brains, we create a reality that we live in. That there are other dimensions that dovetail in our dimension. And I've come to the conclusion that Bigfoot is as much a product of the earth as humans. And what differentiates us from them and what allows us to live in these dovetailed dimensions that are right on top of each other on this planet Earth is because during the evolutionary process, for instance, we know Bigfoot existed at some point. We have the bones, but there's very few left. Because of the places that they're found in Asia, the bones don't last very long. So we only have things like jaw bones and teeth and things like that. But from that, we can determine that it was a bipedal, enormous hominid creature that had to have been 8 feet tall, 9 feet tall, something like that. Enormous. So we know that Bigfoot did exist. For that being to exist, it took millions and millions of years of evolution. And so at some point there was, I believe, a common ancestor which created both humans and Bigfoot and Neanderthals and Denisovans and a bunch of other hominid creatures that have since died out. And I believe that these hominid creatures, the reason why, 1 million, 2 million years ago, why there was 5, 6, 7 different species of upright walking, proto-human type things. Some of them had big giant jaws and were really strong, and some of them were very little, and there was all different kinds, is because souls were experimenting with different avatars. And they were creating different kinds of physical bodies and experimenting with, incarnating in different creatures. And then they decided that the human was the most, the best avatar for the soul to experience four-dimensional reality. And so that's what I believe that was. But in the process, there were two. there were two beings that were created that serve really well for a place for souls to incarnate and experience four-dimensional reality. But as time went on, this creature began to evolve in two different directions. One going towards modern humans, and the other going towards what we call Bigfoot. And the difference is that humans, which we're going to find out have a strong connection to these guys, humans are very intellectual. And in fact, if we go back to very ancient human history, it was about, I believe, 200,000 years ago in southern Africa. And what had happened is all of the other early hominid species had died out. Some of them had become so specialized, their body type had become so specialized to their immediate environment that when there was a climate shift, they weren't able to survive because they were so well adapted to their environment no longer existed. And what ended up happening is that all of these hominids died out, except for, and again, this is in Africa we're talking now, except for the ancestors of modern humans. And even the ancestors of modern humans dwindled away until there was actually a very small population of them left. And they became very adaptable, like the Marines say, adapt and survive, or something like that. They became very adaptable, and they also became smarter. So they became smart to become more adaptable, and they also became more fertile. For instance, I learned this a long time ago. Well, you don't have to worry. You don't have to know why. But apes, I think apes only, they have far less. They procreate far less than humans. The idea that humans can procreate continuously is not something that happens in the animal world. They have very specific, maybe once a year or something like that. But humans, they can procreate all year long. Human females are continuously, cranking out these eggs, and they can have one baby after another. And that is not something that other animals do. And so that is why there's so many humans on the planet. That combined with the fact that they're very crafty and intellectual. So because of our intellect, we created a very practical, down-to-earth way of living. We also became very dominating. We had the power to dominate, control, kill anything and everything that came our way, including each other. That was one strategy. And that strategy, that brain, creates a very specific vibration that creates a very specific reality which we live in. We live in a self-created, manufactured matrix of reality because that's how we chose to survive as a species, talking about humans. But when these two proto-humans split off and went into different directions, one of them went in a different way. Whereas we became what's called gracile, like compared to chimpanzees and gorillas, we are weaklings. We're nothing. There's plenty of first-hand accounts of people seeing gorillas grabbing humans and tearing their limbs off, like they were just tearing something off of a branch, off of a tree. So, we don't have that kind of musculature. So that means that we decided to use our brain, why we started making tools, started making stone tools, and, that gave us, we became very practical and very physical oriented people, and technology became our way to evolve and survive. But the other, our cousins that split off and started evolving in a different way, they had a different way of interacting with their environment. They became much larger. So that, and they became more durable. So that allowed them to handle more physical things, whereas we needed to do things like build shelters and put skins on. And it became all about technology was our way out. We could adapt through technology. These beings tended to interact with their environment through physical strength and physical power, and less about technology, which means that they became more spiritually connected to the vibration of the earth. And it turns out that big feet, they still hunt. They don't hunt like we do. They have a very interesting way of hunting, which is that they're very fast, extremely agile, and of course very strong. And so what they do is they will crouch and wait for, specifically, they'll eat things like fish, a lot of the same things we'll eat. But one of the things that they'll eat is deer. And they'll crouch and they'll wait for deer to come by. And because this is why you hear about the powers of Sasquatches being able to blend in. Like they just blend into the background and you can't see them. And they learn to do that. We would see it as a magical ability, but they learn to change the vibration of their cells so that they could do that. They could merge into the wall of the cave or merge into the plants around them, and you wouldn't be able to see them. I guarantee you, if you've been out into regions of the United States where they exist, you have walked right by them and never seen them. I guarantee you. So what they do is they wait until a deer comes by, and then they jump out, grab them by the rear legs, and swing them overhead against the trees. Whack, 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 whack until it's dead. And then with their bare hands, they tear them open and they grab the viscera, like the kidneys and the livers, and they eat them raw. So that's one of the ways that they survived, but they also evolved like human beings have done. Human beings have evolved emotionally, spiritually. We have our own spiritual evolution. We have our own spiritual powers if we tap into them. We have our own spiritual potential. This Maoshan is one example. The human beings, the 5 organs in the body, the meridians, the 3 energy centers, the kundalini up the spine. We've developed all kinds of really intense, crazy ways to tap into the spirit of the energy of this universe and evolve. But it doesn't mean it's the only way to evolve. It's just one pathway. It's just one set of tools. Big feet Sasquatch went in another way. They learned to create their own reality, which started to shift away from ours. They phased out of our reality. It doesn't mean that they're not in a physical reality. They are. It's just slightly out of phase with ours. And that's because of their emotional, psychological evolution, their intent. And they have language. There's recordings of them. If you can find them, maybe I'll find a link to them. Recordings of them having language. They communicate. They sound very Asian. They sound Japanese almost. But they have language. But their language is even more expressive than ours. There's a lot of intense emotion that comes into their language. And the range of the voice, what they can do with their vocal ranges is far more than us. And they have the power to use their voice in ways to change and alter reality that we don't have. So they evolved just like we did over millions of years, and they created their own environment, but they're more nature-based. They don't need to create cities like we do. Human beings, and I know this from personal experience, that when you leave human habitation, there's a point where you go out of a bubble. You can feel it. You can feel yourself going out of this bubble of consciousness. And you don't realize how much, just by being around other humans, we have this collective unconscious that is constantly programming you how to see and experience life and things like that. So we're just as magical as all of these beings. We're just as magical as they are. But we have our own phase of reality that we live in that dovetails in other physical dimensions that are just slightly out of phase with ours. So I tell you about that because now we're going to understand what these guys are like. These guys have that ability as well. They've learned to master the ability to use their minds, their pituitary glands, their chi, their chakras, whatever they have. They've created their own shift in awareness. There might even be one level more intellectual than us. You know, if because of our intellectuality, we've phased slightly out of phase with the more nature-oriented Sasquatch people. We're just slightly out of phase of them, and they seemingly have this ability to phase in and out of our reality. Maybe that's the case. Maybe we have the ability to phase in and out of their reality. Maybe it happens both ways, that, you know, when we're both phasing in and out, we see each other. And maybe it's just as frightening for them that these, you know, smaller, you know, to them we must look like little gremlins. These little gremlins with all, you know, with guns and bows and arrows and what the heck are those things? You got to stay away from them. And you imagine the big feet people talking, and a little kid coming and said, "I saw one of those human things." Listen, whenever you see them, always make sure to just go back into the forest. Don't let them see you. They'll shoot you. They're very frightened. They're very frightened, destructive creatures. Stay out of their world. That's what we say about trolls. That's what we say about the elves. Still to this day in Iceland, for example. This is really interesting to believe, but it is a law in Iceland. In Iceland, if they're building a road and there's a bunch of rocks, you know, big pile of giant rocks in the way, or, you know, something like that, a hill, a mountain, they have to go to the government and say, "Can we destroy that and build a road there?" And they say, "Well, first we have to get a shaman out there to see if there are any elves that live there." I kid you not. I'm not making this up. This is the truth. I don't know to what extent or how often it happens, but I know that it still happens. And so what will happen is some Norwegian Vitki shaman, whatever that, I don't even know what that is nowadays, will go out there and with whatever tools they have, meditation or whatever ritual, they will determine if elves are living in those rocks. And if the shaman comes back and says, "Nope, there's elves living there, you can't go in there," then by law they have to build the road around that big giant rock sticking out in the middle. They have to do that. But there's, you know, still stories about people being abducted by the elves and taken to their home in the rocks. But when an elf is showing it to you, it's this giant, beautiful stone home with a door in it. You go in there and they'll give you coffee and pancakes, and, you know, as long as you're in their realm, it looks like yours. And then you come home and you go back, and what used to be this elf house with a chimney and people eating pancakes and coffee, there's just this big giant rock there. So if we accept that as reality, it means that that's another being who lives in this reality on Earth, but is shifted slightly, phased slightly out of our awareness. But their reality is no different than ours. It's just out of phase. That's what these guys do. But they're one step ahead of us. If human beings, because of our intellect, we create cities, all the stuff that what we're doing, television, internet, phones, cars, roads, city grids, electricity, all of that creates a vibration in and of itself, and it creates a reality that unfortunately tends to overtake other realities. But it doesn't mean that those realities aren't there. They're just phase shifted out of ours. And so these guys are like us, but they've gone even more intellectual, more technological, and they also have developed ways of communication. Their way of communication seems to be through telepathy. We have something in common with Bigfoot. Bigfoot uses his huge voice. He can use sound in certain ways. He can communicate in certain ways. They also do things similar to trolls and elves and things like that, and they can use dreams and all kinds of strange things like that. But they have some things in common that these guys don't have. I'm guessing. So it was more expedient for them to develop really powerful brains and really powerful methods of psychic communication. And that sounds really wonderful until you experience it. And so the human beings that have experienced these guys come back traumatized. Some of them for the rest of their lives. Some of them end up, on drugs and screwed up and on medication and crazy. It drives them crazy because it's a different reality. And we're not built for their reality. Their reality is so alien and so strange, it is traumatic to us. So even communicating with them can be horrifically damaging and traumatic. At least that's what people are saying. So I want to take a look at this, but there's a spiritual component to all of this. To people who have had these experiences, there is a deeply spiritual connection that completely messes with our idea of spirituality and religion and all the rest of that. And so I want to take a look at that in upcoming videos. In this one, what I want to do is I want to start by reading a book called Alien Interview. Just to let you know, just right off the bat, it is a work of fiction. And as we go through it, I'm going to show you the stuff that I really like about it and the stuff that I don't like about it. And one of the things that's really continuously interesting for me is all of the frauds. The fraudulent teachers and things that have been created knowingly, fraudulently, that in reality are tapping into truths out there. Carlos Castaneda is my favorite example. The guy was a complete fraud, made up everything. He stole, hijacked, appropriated things from Native American culture, combined it with things he appropriated and hijacked from Taoist as well as Hindu, yogic teachings. And then he had his own channeling experience, but he thought he was making it up. In his narcissism, he thought he was making up things having to do with what he called the warrior's path. That actually turned out to be groundbreakingly brand new and true. And so with that understanding, I'm reading this book, which is Alien Interview. And it is fiction. And, people want so badly to know the truth, myself included. I saw this book, I started reading it, and it started blowing my mind. And then I started going, wait a minute, that sounds a hell of a lot like Scientology. And then it turns out the guy's a Scientologist. And in the beginning of the book, it has a disclaimer that says this is fiction. Nobody reads the disclaimer. Even it's in the table of contents, there's a disclaimer that says this is fiction, I made it up. But then he goes on and acts like it's true, and he's invited to seminars, alien seminars, where he talks about it as though it's the truth, even though he has publicly stated that it's not. You can't get more reptilian than that. All right, so I want to end this video by reading some of this, and I want to give you some of my thoughts on it. So I'm just jumping ahead into the book here. So this is apparently from some, he claims to have taken personal writings from some woman who claims after Roswell to have communicated with one of the gray aliens. Okay, so never before that time experienced telepathic communication with anyone, she says. The nonverbal communication I experienced was like the understanding you might have when a child or dog is trying to get you to understand something, but much, much more direct and powerful. Even though there were no words spoken or signs made, the intention of the thoughts were unmistakable to me. I realized later that although I received the thought, I did not necessarily interpret its meaning exactly. Now, I had every intention of reading this and enjoying it, but the more, as I'm starting it, I'm getting the intuition that this is the wrong way to go. So I'm going to stop it right here. I take that back. I'm not going to read this book. I'm going to continue working directly with other sources. So with that, I will end this video. Feel free, please, to go to the new channel. Please subscribe there. It's called Mahadeva Speaks. I've got a couple of channeled readings that I did today, which I'm going to be uploading soon. Please go check them out. So I will continue with this. We're going to talk more and more about, are aliens, visitors, going to be the catalyst that brings human beings to the next level of our awareness? And will that be what forces us to open our awareness to another awakening that's beyond anything we could have understood prior to this time? Thank you so much for your time, my friends. I will see you all very soon. Of course, all the links here are for you. Please check them out. Subscribe, like, hit the bell button. Feel free to comment. And that's it. I'll see you all very soon. Take back your soul. This is another transmission from Mahadeva here at thunderwizard.com headquarters, where you find the world's only unified spiritual energy system at thunderwizard.com. Get ready, because here I come.